One night in 2015, my friend and I were sitting outside of his parents' house. We live in a small neighborhood nestled between two large hills. Next to the neighborhood, there is an empty field with some woods behind it, which connects to one of the larger hills. We were just hanging out, talking about random stuff, when we both heard what sounded like a low growl coming from down the street. It was very strange because it wasn't very loud, but for some reason we could hear it clear as day. The growling continued as if whatever was making this sound was getting closer and closer to us, even though we couldn't see anything at all except for darkness since there are no street lights where he lives. At this point, I began feeling extremely uneasy because I've never experienced anything like this before. So I suggested that maybe we should go inside just in case whatever made these sounds might be dangerous. I don't know why, but my friend didn't seem worried at all. He said, "Nah, man," and kept telling me to calm down, saying that it must have been nothing. Eventually, after about 10 minutes of hearing the same low growl over and over again, which got louder each time, along with footsteps moving around us while still seeing absolutely nothing, I decided to get up and walk towards his front door. Suddenly, almost immediately after standing up, rather than sitting down and looking directly across from each other, the sound completely stopped. Not only did everything stop, but now you could hear crickets chirping loudly as if they had been chirping right under your nose. Yet you were not able to notice them until now. In complete silence, without any warning whatsoever, followed by loud crickets seconds later. This doesn't make sense. It's impossible for every single living thing in the area surrounding us, including insects, to stop making noise, especially considering how quiet everything was during these moments leading up until suddenly stopping out of nowhere. Why would there be such drastic changes within seconds? And more importantly, how come neither he nor I noticed any transition period between those different levels of activity? I mean, think about how crazy this whole situation really is. Two people having a conversation, yet unable to notice things going on around them, such as someone walking through their general vicinity, let alone being able to tell whether they're human or not due to a lack of vision beyond a certain distance. How does anyone expect themselves to react when confronted with unexpected experiences involving unknown entities, unlike our own species, regardless of their intelligence level compared to ours? We stood there, confused, trying to figure out what happened. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, comes another terrifying noise, which scared both my friend and me half to death, causing him to scream bloody murder. At first glance, it seemed like a dog barking nearby. However, upon second thought, I actually realized this dog didn't look like normal dogs do because its legs weren't bent backward the way theirs typically are supposed to be. It was a humanoid dog like creature which stood on its hind legs while staring directly at us. This thing had bright red eyes that glowed from underneath what looked like black hair, covering most parts of its body except for its face, chest, and hands. The way it was standing made it seem almost human because only humans can stand up straight without needing any support whatsoever, unlike animals do when trying to keep balance during moments of sudden movements, etc. Also, something else felt off about the whole situation, aside from just the appearance alone. This dog didn't have a tail, which all normal dogs should have. It's as if this being wasn't even a real animal, but rather someone who is wearing a costume or something along those lines. Instantly after seeing this, my friend and I both started running towards the front door of his house. As we were doing so, though, I swear that I could hear heavy footsteps coming behind us. Yet whenever I would look back. There would never be anything visible following behind. We finally got inside the house after unlocking the door, then immediately slammed it shut before locking the deadbolt. We also made sure to close every single window and door within our sight, since we couldn't tell where exactly it might have been lurking outside. Neither myself nor him ever spoke of these events again until now. I still wonder why neither one of us saw whatever it really was, since we kept looking over our shoulders several times throughout our runaway. I have an extremely long story to tell you. I was around 8 or 9 years old when this happened, and it is still something that haunts me to this day. This took place in the state of Pennsylvania, specifically outside of Philadelphia, where there are a lot of woods surrounding the area. I used to go on walks with my mom through these trails that were not too far from our house at all. But one night, we decided to take a different path than usual due to feeling adventurous. It was about dusk time, so the sun had already gone down behind the trees, making everything look pretty dark, even though it wasn't completely pitch black yet. This also meant visibility would be limited throughout the rest of the walk. As we walked along the trail, we suddenly heard what sounded like a low growl coming from right next to us, followed by footsteps moving around the bushes nearby. Except we couldn't see anything since there was a lack of proper lighting around the area, besides the moonlight shining down overhead. I began feeling extremely uneasy because I had never experienced anything like this before. However, my mother didn't seem worried at all, saying, "It's just some animal," over and over again. This was despite how strange everything seemed, considering there weren't any animals visible whatsoever, nor did we hear the typical sounds associated with them, such as chirping crickets, etc. The only thing we could hear was our own voices speaking out loud to each other and whatever else made those noises mentioned earlier. The further we went into the woods, the more apparent it became that something wasn't right here. This was especially true after hearing the same exact noises again, except louder. At that point, both my mother and I knew for certain, without any doubt in our minds, that whatever was responsible wasn't a normal living being, whether human or animal alike. Thus, it shouldn't be taken lightly, regardless of how peaceful things may appear on the surface. We quickly turned back and started running towards home as fast as possible, while constantly looking over our shoulders to make sure nothing was following behind. Although once we got onto the main road, we finally felt safe enough to slow our pace down a little bit, knowing we wouldn't find ourselves alone anymore. It has been many years now since then, but every single detail involving the events leading up until the moment when we actually saw the Dogman will forever haunt me. Even though I don't know exactly what it really was, aside from its appearance sounding similar to a werewolf type creature during moments where it should have been seen clearly, there is always a part of my mind telling myself and others who've heard stories like mine to believe the lies told to yourself regarding how real the situation truly is compared to everyone else who believes in a true reality beyond their understanding. Also, I want to add an interesting fact shared by another person who had experiences with the creature. He encountered it and says that whenever he tries to talk to someone about it, they think he is crazy. He can prove otherwise, seeing as he's missing his left hand due to an encounter with the Dogman. Coincidentally enough, I am also missing my left hand after meeting the same entity described within your article. Tell me, isn't this bizarre? I have been a listener of your show for about 2 years now. I have heard many stories from the people you interview, and some of them sound very similar to my own experiences. However, none are exactly like mine. Some may say that it is because they were not true encounters with dogmen, but I know what I saw and there was no mistaking it. It all started when I was around 8 or 9 years old in northern Minnesota, where we lived at the time. My brother, who is only a year older than me, and our friends would always play outside together during the summer months. We had a pretty big yard that was surrounded by trees on three sides, which led into an even bigger forested area behind our house. We used to love playing hide and seek out there because there were so many places to hide. But one day, while we were playing, something happened that changed everything for us forever. My friend, who was it, went looking for everyone else while counting down from 10 as usual. But after he got done counting, he couldn't find any of us anywhere. He called out our names several times before giving up and going back inside, thinking maybe we had gone home without telling him first, which wasn't uncommon. After waiting a while longer, hoping someone would come back outside looking for him too, since nobody ever did, he decided to just go ahead and start another game by himself instead, or so he thought. As soon as he stepped foot onto the porch, though, something caught his eye off towards the left side near the edge of the property line where most of the trees are located. Standing right next to a tree, staring directly at him, was a creature with its huge yellow eyes and wide open mouth full of sharp teeth showing through its lips, snarling and growling lowly. It almost sounded like a deep rumble coming from its chest or throat area rather than its mouth itself. And then it lunged forward toward him, making this weird high pitched screeching noise unlike anything he had ever heard before. This was followed immediately by loud crashing sounds of breaking branches and leaves being ripped apart underfoot as he ran away screaming bloody murder until finally reaching the safety inside the house. He slammed the door shut, locking the deadbolt behind him, feeling terrified beyond belief. He wondered if whatever chased him could break through the walls and get inside somehow, still attack despite the locked doors, windows closed, and curtains drawn tight, with nothing visible except darkness everywhere surrounding the entire place. I told my parents what happened, but they didn't believe me. They said I must have imagined the whole thing and probably just seen a bear or deer mistaking its identity, which caused a fear reaction response, etc., blah, blah, blah. It was the typical adult stuff, dismissive attitude, and lack of understanding or empathy whatsoever. But here's the kicker. The same exact thing kept happening every single night afterward, over the course of the following weeks, months, and even years. Sometimes it happened multiple times per week, always starting around midnight and lasting until the early morning hours as sunrise approached. Each time it became more intense, aggressive, violent, and dangerous in nature, eventually escalating to the point of nearly killing anyone involved, including myself, twice. Once, when I tried running away alone in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and another instance when I was hiding in a closet, scared to death, praying it wouldn't find me. There's a lot more details I can share if you're interested in hearing the rest of the story and want to help figure out how to stop these things from happening again. Please let me know. Thanks for reading, and I hope to talk soon. I live in a small town in the state of Illinois. I am 15 years old and have been hunting for about 5 years now. My dad has always told me to be careful when out hunting. However, he never really explained why until this event happened. It was early November during deer season. My dad had just dropped me off at our usual spot on his four-wheeler. He left to go back home so that he could get ready for work, as he worked nights. It was still dark outside, but the moonlight shining down through the trees made it possible to see well enough. I gathered all my gear and started walking towards my tree stand, which was only about 100 yards away from where I got dropped off. As soon as I sat down in my stand, something felt off. It was almost as if someone or something was watching me. About an hour went by without seeing anything, except for some squirrels running around on the ground below me. Suddenly there came a loud crashing sound from behind where I had come from earlier that morning. Whatever made this noise sounded big because it shook the ground beneath us, as if an elephant were stomping its feet. At first I thought it might have been another hunter who accidentally stumbled upon us while we were out here trying to hunt deer. However, after waiting patiently and listening closely, hoping they would leave soon so we could continue our hunt undisturbed, no one ever showed up. Nor did anyone make any other noises whatsoever since then either. Then things began getting even weirder than before. All of a sudden, everything around us became eerily quiet. Not even birds chirped anymore, nor did any leaves rustle against each other due to the wind blowing through them. This is very unusual, especially considering how many different types of animals live within these woods alone, such as raccoons, possums, skunks, and so on. After what seemed like forever, the silence finally broke when suddenly there came another loud crashing sound again from behind, where we originally heard those previous noises earlier today. This time, though, whatever made this noise sounded much bigger than before because it once again shook the ground beneath us, just like last time, too. This same exact thing repeated itself over and over several times throughout the rest of the day until it eventually stopped altogether, leaving nothing but pure darkness surrounding the area instead. And believe me, not only was I scared out of my wits, but I was also feeling extremely paranoid, thinking somebody must have followed me here somehow, despite the fact that nobody else was anywhere near the place at all. I'm pretty confident that I nearly was taken out by a Dogman creature. Matt, what's your opinion? Was this anything like what almost got you in those steel mills? I was 14 years old at the time. I lived in a small town called Paden City, West Virginia. It's on the Ohio River and is right across from New Martinsville, West Virginia, which is where this took place. I had two friends who were brothers and lived there. Their names are Jason and Justin. Their last name has been removed by request. They would come to my house every summer for about a month or so. This was because their dad worked out of state during the summers as an electrician. Anyway, we were all into hunting and fishing back then and spent most of our days doing just that. One day we decided to go down to what we called the island. It was actually connected by a sandbar, but when it rained hard enough, it would flood over, making it an island. It was late July or early August because school hadn't started yet. We got up early one morning before daylight, around 4:30 in the morning, so we could get down there before first light. When you walk onto the island, there's a big grassy area with trees surrounding three sides of it, with the river being on one side. Just inside the island is another smaller patch of grass surrounded by trees. We always set up camp in that spot whenever we went down there. After setting up camp, which consisted only of leaving our backpacks full of snacks, etc., we walked around looking for deer signs since bow season was coming soon. As daylight broke, after walking around a while, I noticed something strange along the edge where the bigger part meets the island. There were these weird tracks going all along this embankment. They looked like dog prints, but they weren't very big, maybe 4 inches long. They also didn't have any claw marks like normal dogs do. The thing that really stood out, though, was how far apart each print was from each other. These things had been moving fast. We followed them until they disappeared into some thick brush. After following them for quite some distance through some pretty rough terrain, they came back out onto another gravel bar. This gravel bar ran parallel with the island's shoreline, except on this side, instead of being flat like ours, it sloped upwards towards those cliffs. At this point, I'm starting to get freaked out, thinking, what kind of animal makes tracks like these? As soon as I thought that, Jason said, "Hey, look." He pointed towards those cliffs, saying he saw something move behind some rocks. Now remember, it's still fairly dark outside at this point, so whatever made those tracks must be hiding behind those rocks, waiting for us to leave so it can cross back over. That's when things got even weirder. As soon as Jason pointed towards those cliffs, whatever made those tracks let out a blood-curdling scream. It sounded exactly like what you hear on your show, minus any wolf sounds. It screamed twice more after that. Then, nothing. We sat frozen, staring at each other, not knowing what to do next. All three screams came from different spots along those cliffs, too. Not wanting anything else bad to happen while trying to figure everything out, I told everyone, let's pack up and head home. Once packed up again, without incident, thankfully, we headed home, talking about what happened almost nonstop. Eventually, we decided not to tell anyone else about what happened, fearing no one would believe us anyway. Fast forward now, 30 years later. I've listened religiously every night since finding your show, hoping someone will call in having heard similar sounds. Well, last week, finally, someone did. I couldn't believe my ears hearing basically the same exact thing me and my friends heard way back then. Anyway, thank you very much for reading my story. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask away. I was 18 years old, and my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife of over 30 years, were driving back from a day trip to Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We had spent the day looking around the town and shopping in some of the local stores. It was getting late, so we decided to head home before it got too dark. I don't remember the exact time, but I know that it wasn't quite dusk yet. We were on Highway 23 heading south towards Huntsville when we came up over a hill. There, standing in the middle of our lane about halfway down this hill, was something. As soon as we crested the top of the hill, whatever it was turned its head directly at us. It had bright yellow eyes that seemed to glow, as if they were reflecting our headlights or something. It didn't seem natural. This thing then spread out these huge wings, which looked like bat wings, only much bigger than any bat you have ever seen. The wingspan must have been close to, if not more than, twice as wide as our car. When he opened his wings, he also took 2 steps forward into our lane, right in front of us. The first thing I thought when I saw him open his wings and step into our path was, oh crap, I knew there wasn't enough room between me and this creature for him to get airborne without hitting one side or another with those giant wings. So instead of trying to stop or swerve out of the way, which would have probably caused us both serious injury, all within seconds, mind you, I let off the gas slightly so that he would be able to clear my car safely. I'm guessing by now your readers are thinking, what kind of drugs were these kids doing? But believe me, neither one of us has ever done drugs, nor do either one of us drink alcohol, even today. So after letting off the gas slightly until he cleared my vehicle, once again, immediately afterwards, without saying anything, she reached over and grabbed hold tightly onto my arm. She dug her nails deep into me, causing blood blisters, which lasted several days afterwards. Afterwards, she told me how terrified she had been during this encounter, but never said anything while it happened. She didn't want to distract me from concentrating on keeping control over the car since we weren't wearing seat belts due to being young and dumb. Plus, they hadn't passed laws requiring them yet. Anyway, after passing underneath him by no more than inches above the roofline level, once again, almost instantly upon clearing him completely, He folded up his massive black leathery-looking membrane-type wings behind himself. Along with taking 3 long strides across the road, he then stepped off the shoulder, disappearing down the embankment on the next side of the road. He never flapped his wings even once during the entire encounter leading up to crossing the road, nor did he make any noise whatsoever, other than hearing gravel crunching underfoot while walking away from the highway. As soon as possible after seeing the last glimpse of him going down the embankment beside the side road, we pulled over and stopped the car so we could look back to see if we could still see where he went exactly. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't really tell exactly where he went due to the fact the sun had already set below the horizon, making everything darker except for a few places here and there, such as street lights, etc. So anyway, since we couldn't tell exactly where he went, we tried to find a place to turn around and go back to try and follow his tracks through the grassy ditch area beside the pavement, hoping maybe we might catch another glimpse somewhere further ahead. But alas, we found nothing else anywhere nearby, despite searching for several minutes using high beams, low beams, flashers, and fog lights, etc. We finally gave up searching and headed home, discussing the event the whole way. So, get this. Whatever this bat-like creature was had the head of a wolf. Yeah, you heard me right. Like a werewolf with bat wings. I can only go by what I remember seeing. What sort of pit from hell did this thing crawl out of? Got any ideas? Because I don't.